Aaron Burr was probably the greatest of the known alleged conspirators, and it led to the what I think is in the running for the trial of the century, of the 19th century, with a former Vice President of the United States on trial for treason against the United States.
Who was Aaron Burr as a person?
Aaron Burr has an interesting biography. His grandfather was Jonathan Edwards, the great leader of the Great Awakening, whose claim to fame was his bone-chilling sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Burr himself studied for the ministry for a while before he decided it was not for him. He then studied law under his famous brother-in-law, Tapping Reeve, who operated the most famous law school in the United States at the time in Litchfield, Connecticut. Burr then stopped his practice of law, or his study of law, to serve in the Continental Army. He was involved in the initial invasion of Quebec, which did not go well, but became a minor hero for helping extricate the troops from that. Was a fairly famous officer in the Army for the rest of the war, and then began to practice law in New York, along with his friend and competitor Alexander Hamilton. They often collaborated, and sometimes they found themselves on different sides. Burr was very capable, very intelligent, very quickly rose through the political ranks in New York, became a United States Senator, and from there it was a short step to becoming a vice presidential candidate in 1796, and then actual vice president in 1801.
Why was Aaron Burr considered a dark and compelling figure?
He's something of a mystery. He very much kept his views to himself. He was thought of as being a great political intriguer. He was not hot-headed. He was very calm, a bit aloof, had a great deal of personal magnetism. I know one or two people actually have considered the possibility that he's a sociopath. But he was very good at manipulating people, at moving himself into positions of political power. But then in the end, he apparently alienated everyone. He alienated the Federalist political party, the Republican political party. He alienated most of the leading political factions in his state of New York. And in the end, gunned down an erstwhile friend and professional rival of his, Alexander Hamilton, in a duel, killing Hamilton while he was the sitting vice president, and from there moved on to these adventures in the Southwest and was accused of treason against his own country.
Why did he get into a duel with Hamilton?
He got into a duel with Hamilton in the summer of 1804 during his final year as vice president. And I think the thing that instigated that was his failure to win election as governor of New York, and he believed that Hamilton had intrigued against him to keep him out of power. He knew that he was not going to be reelected vice president, and so he seized the pretense of Hamilton having said something unpleasant about Burr, something which was described as despicable. So he very deliberately chose to challenge Hamilton on that. Hamilton obfuscated, Hamilton refused to explain himself, and therefore Burr challenged him to a duel. It's a bit of a mystery as to why Burr did that. Even more of a mystery that he killed Hamilton. He once referred to my friend Hamilton, whom I shot. But there's a great deal about Burr that really isn't explicable. Many people have theories, but there's not enough evidence to support most of them.
What was he like as a person?
Charming. He was absolutely charming, and obviously very interested in what the person he's talking to had to say. Burr was also very capable at reading people, I think, and very capable of interacting with people. One thing that we always hear about, or often hear about from people who know Burr, are his eyes. They're dark, they glitter, they're incredibly intelligent eyes, and you see over and over again people making reference to how striking Burr's gaze is. So he has all the charm of a sociopath. Not that I think he's a sociopath, but some people believe that perhaps he was a very high-functioning sociopath.
Can you give me an example?
Well, the fact that he shot one of his best friends in a duel and then told a very large number of lies about what he was doing in the West in order to attempt to raise money for whatever he actually was doing in the West. Was he planning to invade Mexico? Was he planning to to sunder the western part of the Union from the rest of the United States? Was he planning to march on Washington and proclaim himself the new president? Or was he planning simply to settle some lands in Louisiana? He told many different people variations on all of these stories. They couldn't all be true. And obviously, those stories were designed to manipulate people. And a lot of them believed him.
So when he was charged with treason, what was the treasonous act that he committed?
Well, Burr was charged with treason, not actually conspiracy to commit treason. And in the end, he was acquitted in the trial of the century. The problem is he had told so many stories, and so many different groups on the frontier were involved in so many different things. It was very hard for President Jefferson and his prosecutors actually to find anything that Burr had actually done. The act that the prosecutors finally settled on took place on Blennerhassett's Island, which was on the Ohio River in the current day state of West Virginia. Back then it would have been Virginia. Harmon Blennerhassett and his wife were wealthy Irish settlers who had fallen under Burr's spell, and Burr had used Blennerhassett's Island as an initial staging area. One night in December of 1806, the Ohio militia rode out to the island because there were many men there preparing to get in boats and go downstream, ostensibly as part of Burr's expedition. The militia attempted to arrest some of the ringleaders there, and the other settlers pulled guns on them. And that, claimed the prosecutors, was the overt act of treason that is required by the Constitution. Burr himself was not there, and ultimately the prosecution could not prove that Burr himself had procured that act, had instigated it. And based on the ruling of Circuit Judge John Marshall, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but also serving as trial judge at this time, based on Marshall's definition of treason, the fact that Burr was not there and could not be shown to have procured that act of treason was enough to block any possible conviction of Burr.
Why was it important to you to write this book?
It's important to know what goes on in this event because it's such an important moment in American history. The fact that the government was willing to charge Burr with treason. Usually governments don't, or at least the United States government, but I think any government, doesn't really turn to treason prosecutions unless it somehow feels itself an unstable government or gravely threatened. The United States government was still a young government. The idea of different political parties was still a new one. The idea of getting your head around the fact that a political party could be opposed to your policies and not opposed to the government itself was still a new idea. Thomas Jefferson, the president, who blamed Burr for trying to steal the presidency from him in the disputed election of 1800, had a great deal of animosity to Burr. He actually pronounced Burr guilty before the trial took place. So you see politics in all its nastiness. You see grand legal battles, you see personal battles over political power, you see policy battles, you see a great deal of insecurity among these leaders and the fact that they're willing to charge Burr at all. It's really quite a slice of everything from law to geostrategy to criminal procedure to partisan politics. It tells us a lot about the early republic from many different directions.